Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. The third call from an unknown number should have gone to voicemail like the others. Instead, I answered it, and the sound of my wife's panicked breathing on the other end told me this wasn't a spam call. This was something else entirely. "There are trucks at our house," she said, her voice shaking. "Moving trucks. And men. Lots of men loading furniture. Our furniture." I leaned back in my office chair, noting the time on my computer screen. 2:47 on a Tuesday afternoon. Day 3 of the most peaceful silence I'd experienced in years. "Why didn't you tell me we were moving?" Her voice pitched higher. "Why aren't you answering your phone?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment, savoring the irony. "I think you have the wrong number." "What?" "No, it's me. I'm calling from a friend's phone because—" "Also," I interrupted calmly, "you might want to check whose house that actually is." I hung up before she could respond. The phone immediately started buzzing again. Unknown number flashing on the screen. I sent it to voicemail and returned to the spreadsheet I'd been working on. For the first time in 3 days, I allowed myself a small smile. 3 days. 72 hours of complete, blessed silence. No texts at 9 in the morning asking where I was having lunch. No calls at 2 in the afternoon demanding to know who that woman was in the background of our office. No constant location checks disguised as casual concern, as if my phone's GPS was some kind of electronic leash she needed to monitor hourly. For 3 days, I'd eaten lunch without having to photograph my food and send proof I wasn't dining with a female colleague. I'd stayed late at work without interrogation about why I needed the extra time. I'd gone to the gym without a follow-up call checking if I was really there or meeting someone else. 3 days of breathing room I hadn't realized I'd been suffocating without. The first day, I'd been cautiously optimistic. Maybe she was busy. Maybe the friend group was having some kind of event. I'd actually felt a small flutter of concern around dinner time when I hadn't heard from her. Old habits, I suppose. 7 years of conditioning don't disappear in an afternoon. The second day, the concern faded, replaced by something else. Clarity. The kind that comes when you suddenly realize you've been holding your breath for months and finally remembered how to exhale. I'd slept better that night than I had in half a year. No 3 a.m. wake-up interrogations about who I'd been dreaming about. No phone checks to see if I was texting someone while she was asleep. By day 3, I understood. This wasn't her being busy. This was the challenge. The test. The game she'd told me about at dinner. The one I pretended not to understand. The phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Then again. And again. I let them all go to voicemail. My mind drifted back to 5 days ago, when my wife had casually mentioned her friend group's newest challenge over dinner. She'd been scrolling through her phone, barely looking up as she spoke. That had become normal over the past few months. Her attention split between me and whatever was happening in that group chat. The one that was always buzzing. Always demanding her focus. The girls have this idea. A social experiment, kind of. She'd smiled that smile she used when she thought she was being clever. The one that made her look like a teenager plotting something with her friends at a sleepover. Delete his number for a week. See if he even notices you're gone. I'd set down my fork carefully, watching her face. Still glued to the screen. Still scrolling. That's the experiment. Yeah. If he really loves you, he'll find a way to reach out. It proves whether he actually values you or just takes you for granted. She'd finally looked at me then, phone lowered just enough to make eye contact, waiting for a reaction. Testing me even then, I realized now. I'd given her nothing, just a nod and returned to my dinner. Let her interpret the silence however she wanted. It wasn't the first challenge from that group. Over the past 2 months, she'd casually mentioned the others. One friend had stopped cooking entirely for 2 weeks to see if her boyfriend would step up or let them both starve. Another had refused to respond to good morning texts, tracking how long it would take before her partner noticed something was wrong. A third had withheld all physical intimacy for a week to reset the power balance, as she'd called it. Each time my wife told me these stories, her tone had been admiring, impressed. Like these women had discovered some secret truth about relationships that the rest of the world was too naive to see. She'd been collecting these stories like ammunition, I realized, building up to her own version, waiting for the challenge that would prove whatever it was she needed to prove. She'd interpreted my silence as ignorance. Like I didn't understand what she was telling me. Like I couldn't read between the lines. Like I was the kind of man who wouldn't notice when his wife was planning to disappear for a week. I'd understood perfectly. She was telling me she valued her friend's approval more than our marriage. She was announcing that she'd rather test me than trust me. She was declaring that games were more important than partnership. Most importantly, she was showing me exactly who she'd become under the influence of that friend group. Someone I barely recognized anymore. So I'd made 3 phone calls that evening after she went to bed. My real estate attorney first, then a moving company, then a storage facility. Each conversation calm, methodical, laying the groundwork, making sure everything would be legal, documented, clean. Then I'd waited, not for her to come back, but to see if she'd show any awareness of what she'd done, any recognition that she'd crossed a line, any indication that the woman I married was still somewhere inside the person who'd become obsessed with winning approval from a group of people whose own relationships were falling apart. My phone rang again. 4th call. I answered. What property owner? Her voice was frantic now. The movers won't talk to me. They said to contact the property owner. Is this a joke? Are you punishing me for something? The neighbors are watching. How do I make them stop? I'm sorry, who is this? I kept my voice polite, almost friendly. Stop it. This isn't funny. Make them stop loading our stuff. If you're looking for the previous tenant, they moved out. The lease wasn't renewed. I'd suggest contacting your landlord for forwarding information. I hung up again. The house. That was the beautiful irony in all of this. She'd never known it was solely in my name. Never asked. Never questioned. I'd purchased it 3 years before we got married, saved for years to afford the down payment, worked overtime to build up enough for closing costs. It was mine before she ever set foot in it. When she'd moved in after the wedding, she'd just assumed. Assumed we owned it together because we lived there together. Assumed that marriage automatically meant shared ownership of everything. She'd never looked at the deed. Never asked about the mortgage. Never wondered why all the property tax bills came in my name only. Assumption, like respect, can evaporate when tested. She'd been so busy testing whether I'd notice her absence that she'd never stopped to consider what else she might not have noticed. Like who actually owned the roof over her head. The eviction papers had been filed on day 1 of her challenge. The day she deleted my number and announced to her friends that she was testing whether I'd care. While she was sending laughing emojis to her group chat, I was signing legal documents with my attorney. Completely legal. 30 days notice as required by DC law. All documented. All clean. All proper. Another call came through. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Different voice this time. One of her friends. The ringleader of the group, if I had to guess. The one who probably came up with most of these brilliant challenges. What the hell do you think you're doing? The friend's voice was sharp, aggressive. The kind of aggressive that comes from someone who's never actually faced consequences before. You can't just kick her out. This is illegal. We have rights. You're just mad she has friends who empower her. I almost laughed at that last part. Empowerment. That was their favorite word, wasn't it? Every manipulation tactic wrapped up in empowerment language. Every control scheme justified as self-worth. Every test disguised as growth. Actually, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level, everything I've done is entirely legal. I own the house. Solely. Purchased it 3 years before we married. I initiated proper eviction proceedings with appropriate notice. I gave the legally required 30 days. I documented everything with my attorney. Your friend chose to be unreachable precisely when these conversations should have happened. Poor timing on her part. Silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning. The realization that maybe, just maybe, they'd miscalculated. But you can't just. Tell me something. I interrupted, genuinely curious now. Does empowerment usually involve making someone homeless? Or is that a new feature of the program? Because from where I'm sitting, your advice to test whether I'd chase her has resulted in her finding out exactly what happens when you play games with someone who's decided to stop playing. Is that empowering? Or is that just consequences? Silence again. Then the backpedaling began. I'd expected this. Bullies always backpedal when someone stands up to them. We were just trying to help her see her worth. It was just a challenge. A game. You're supposed to chase after her, not. She trailed off, reality finally sinking in. The game wasn't playing out the way she'd scripted it. Here's the thing about games, I said. They're only fun when everyone knows they're playing. And they only work when the other player cares about winning. I stopped playing 3 days ago. exactly when she deleted my number. I ended the call. The phone rang again almost immediately. My wife. I could hear her crying before she even spoke. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind she'd learned to deploy when she wanted something. These were the tears of someone who'd just realized the game was over and she'd lost. They showed me the group chat, she said through sobs. They showed me everything we were saying about you. About all of this. I'm reading it now and I can't believe Her voice broke completely. I waited. Let the silence stretch. Let her sit with what she was seeing. Day 1. She continued, struggling to get the words out. I texted them that I deleted your number. That you had no idea. I actually used a laughing emoji. I wrote, he has no idea, with a laughing face. She choked on the memory. They all responded saying this was going to be so good. That men are oblivious. That you wouldn't even notice for days. We were laughing about it. About you. Like it was some kind of joke. I said nothing. The silence was doing more work than any words I could offer. Day 2. She went on, her voice shaking. They asked if you were panicking yet. I told them nothing. Radio silence. That you probably just thought I was busy with them. One of them said maybe you were relieved. A sharp intake of breath. I told her to stop. But deep down, I was worried she might be right. That's when they all jumped in, telling me I was teaching you that I'm not always available. That you needed to learn my value. That this was good for you. Good for us. The rationalization. That's what these groups did best. Take something manipulative and wrap it in self-help language until it sounded reasonable. Until it sounded like growth instead of control. And day 3, she whispered. This morning, they asked for a status update before I left for work. I told them I was starting to worry a little. That it had been 3 full days. They told me not to crack now. That I was winning. One of them said you were probably spiraling at home, trying to figure out what you did wrong. They all agreed. Said men can't handle being ignored. That you were probably losing your mind trying to reach me. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they'd been fantasizing about me spiraling at home, losing my mind with worry, I'd been signing lease termination papers at my attorney's office. While they'd imagined me panicking, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong, I'd been coordinating moving schedules and storage unit rentals. While they'd pictured me blowing up phones trying to find her, I'd been sleeping better than I had in months. They said you'd be panicking, she said, her voice dropping to barely audible. They promised me you'd be blowing up their phones, trying to find me. They swore I'd have all the power when I came back. That you'd be so grateful and scared of losing me that I could get whatever I wanted. Another sob. Why aren't you scared of losing me? That question. Right there. That was the heart of it all. The assumption that fear should be the foundation of love. That keeping someone afraid of loss was the same as making them value you. That power games and emotional manipulation were somehow tools of a healthy relationship. I stood up from my desk and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Because you can't lose something that already chose to leave. You didn't delete a phone number. You deleted respect, consideration, and partnership. The number was just the symbol. The test was just the excuse. What you really deleted was me. And I'm simply respecting your choice. It was just a challenge. I wasn't really going to stay away. I was coming back tonight. This is extreme. We can fix this. I'll tell them the experiment is over. The experiment is over. I agreed. You got your results. You learned whether I'd notice you were gone. I noticed immediately. I also noticed how peaceful it was. You tested whether I'd chase you. I won't. You wanted to see what happened when you withdrew yourself from my life. Now you know. So that's it. 7 years over because of a stupid challenge? No. 7 years over because you valued winning a game with your friends more than your marriage. The challenge was just how you showed me. Another call came through. Different friend. Apologetic. Scared. Please, she said. Please just talk to her. Fix this. Her boyfriend found out about the challenge advice. He's asking questions about other advice the group has given. He found messages about manipulation tactics. Can you please just fix this? We didn't think. That's the problem. I cut her off. You didn't think. You thought you were playing a game where the pieces would stay where you put them. You didn't consider that some pieces might just leave the board entirely. But other people are. Her boyfriend moved out. And another girl's partner found the group chat about training men. He's talking to a divorce attorney. This is falling apart. You all built an echo chamber where bad advice sounded like empowerment, I said. You validated each other's worst impulses until someone finally called the bluff. That someone was me. I hung up. The next morning, I agreed to meet my wife at a coffee shop in Woodley Park. Bourbon coffee, specifically. I'd chosen it deliberately. Neutral territory. Public space. Lots of witnesses if she decided to make a scene, though I doubted she had the energy for drama anymore. The texts leading up to the meeting had been desperate, pleading. All the fire from her friends' aggressive calls had burned out, leaving only ash and regret. I arrived first, ordered a black coffee, and took a table near the window. Watched people walking their dogs in the morning sun. Normal people living normal lives without manufactured crises and relationship tests. It looked peaceful. I wanted that. She arrived 10 minutes late, looking like she'd been through a war. Mascara smeared from crying, not artfully applied like she usually wore it. Same clothes as yesterday, wrinkled now. Hair pulled back in a messy knot instead of the careful styling she usually preferred. Phone in her shaking hands, borrowed from yet another friend. She'd apparently gone through several phones at this point, burning through her friend group's resources as they all started to panic about what they'd helped create. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she slid into the chair across from me. Her voice was hoarse from crying, eyes red and swollen. I took a sip of my coffee before responding. Let her sit in the uncertainty for a moment. "I'm here to clarify terms, not reconcile. Let's be clear about that up front so we don't waste each other's time." Her face crumpled, but she nodded, gathered herself. "I was insecure. That's what started all this. I was feeling insecure in our marriage, and instead of talking to you about it, I let them convince me that the answer was to test you. They made it sound so reasonable, like it was just about knowing my worth, about making sure you valued me." She paused, waiting for me to jump in, to tell her I understood, to offer some kind of absolution. I gave her nothing. "I thought you'd taken me for granted," she continued, words coming faster now, desperate to fill the silence. "I thought maybe you'd stopped seeing me, stopped appreciating me, and I wanted you to show you cared, to prove that I mattered to you. You wanted me to show I cared by making me panic when you disappeared?" I kept my voice level, clinical almost. "That's not seeking reassurance. That's seeking control. There's a difference, a significant one." I set my coffee down and leaned forward slightly. "You thought I took you for granted. Fine. That's a feeling. Feelings are valid. But here's what I need you to understand. Did you once, even once, ask me how I felt? Did you express your needs directly? Did you sit me down and say, 'Hey, I'm feeling disconnected. Can we talk about this?' Or did you skip straight to tests and games because your friends convinced you that manipulation was the same as empowerment?" She looked down at the table. "I should have talked to you." "Yes, you should have. But you were insecure, so instead of working on that insecurity or communicating about it, you surrounded yourself with people who told you the solution was manipulation rather than communication. People who gave you permission to treat me like a science experiment instead of a partner." "It wasn't like that. I know more than you think," I interrupted. "One of your friend's boyfriends shared the full group chat after his own discovery. Turns out when men find out they're being manipulated, they talk to each other too. We share information. We make informed decisions. And right now, several men in your friend group's orbit are making very informed decisions about their futures." Her eyes went wide with something between fear and shame. "The full chat? Everything. Everything. The scorekeeping system you all had for relationship wins against your partners. Remember that? Each of you tracking points for who could control their man most effectively. The competition for who could train their boyfriend or husband best, like we were dogs being taught tricks. The advice threads on withholding affection, silent treatments, manufactured jealousy. The mock proposals for increasingly controlling challenges. The celebrations every time one of you successfully manipulated your partner into doing what you wanted." I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the screenshots I'd saved. I have specific examples if you need reminders. But here's my personal favorite, from 6 weeks ago. I read from the screen, watching her face as the words hit home. "You wrote, 'He's too comfortable. Needs to be reminded I have options. Going to start mentioning my coworker more. Make him sweat a little.'" She covered her face with her hands, but I continued. "Your friend responded, 'Yes. Let him know you're a catch that could leave anytime.' And you replied." I paused for effect. "Exactly. Keep them insecure, keep them trying." She was shaking now, hands still covering her face. "Do you understand what you were doing? You weren't building me up. You weren't strengthening our marriage. You were deliberately, systematically trying to make me insecure so you could feel powerful. You were weaponizing my potential fear of losing you. That's not love. That's not partnership. That's psychological warfare dressed up as self-improvement. I didn't mean it like that, she whispered, but the words had no conviction behind them. You meant exactly like that. The words are right there. Documented. Timestamped. You can't rewrite history just because you don't like how it looks in retrospect. I put my phone away. You weren't empowering yourself. You were weaponizing insecurity. Mine, that you were trying to manufacture. And yours, that you were trying to medicate with control. Neither of those is a foundation for marriage. Neither of those is love. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her borrowed phone on the table. Finally, she looked up at me. You did all this in 3 days? The eviction, the movers, the storage unit. All of it. No, I corrected. I made 3 phone calls in 3 hours on the evening you told me about the challenge. I talked to my real estate attorney. I talked to a moving company. I talked to a storage facility. Each conversation took maybe 15 minutes. That's less than an hour of actual work. Her expression shifted from despair to confusion. Then what took 3 days? Waiting, I said simply. I waited to see if you'd come back on your own. If you'd wake up on day 2 and realize what you'd done. If you'd call me, not to test whether I'd notice, but to apologize for even considering such a thing. If you'd show any awareness that you'd crossed a line. Any indication that the woman I married was still in there somewhere, underneath all the friend group influence. I didn't know you were waiting for that. Of course you didn't. You were too busy checking in with your friends about whether I was panicking yet. Too busy collecting their predictions about how I'd be spiraling. Too busy convincing yourself this was working exactly as planned. I paused. So on day 2, when you still hadn't called, when you still hadn't shown any recognition of what you'd done, I confirmed the arrangements. Signed the final papers. Locked in the moving date. And on day 3, the movers came. You chose to be unreachable during the exact window when we should have been having important conversations about our future. I chose to move forward with mine. What about our accounts? Her voice was small now. Childlike. Our stuff? How does any of this even work? The joint account is being closed. My attorney has already initiated that process. Division of assets will be handled per the prenup. You remember the prenup, right? She stared at me blankly. We have a prenup? I actually had to work to keep from showing my disbelief. We signed it drunk at that Vegas courthouse wedding 7 years ago. You don't remember? You kept saying it was romantic that we were doing everything on impulse. No planning, no fuss, just us and our love. You signed the prenup right after we signed the marriage certificate, said it was all just paperwork, meaningless paperwork. I don't remember signing anything except the marriage certificate. Well, you did. And it's airtight. My attorney made sure of that even through our alcohol-induced enthusiasm. Clean break. Division of what we've acquired together, which isn't much. No alimony. The marriage was too short, and the prenup is crystal clear on that point. I took another sip of coffee. His office will contact you with settlement details. Everything will be fair, but everything will also be final. She looked like she might be sick. Where's all my stuff? In a storage unit off Rockville Pike. I've paid for 3 months. The address was in the email my lawyer sent you yesterday. You did get that email, right? Or were you too busy dealing with the immediate crisis to check? She pulled out the borrowed phone, scrolling frantically. I didn't. There's so much. I can't. Take your time, I said, not unkindly. You have 27 days left for the house. That's how much time remains on the legally required 30-day notice. You'll need to be fully moved out by then. The storage unit gives you 3 months to sort through everything and figure out your next steps. After that, the storage fees become your responsibility. Is there any way to fix this? Her voice was desperate now. Any way back? Fix implies something broke accidentally. This wasn't an accident. You chose this path. Multiple times. Multiple ways. Over multiple weeks. I paused. But hypothetically, if someone wanted to fix this, they'd have to fundamentally change how they view relationships. They'd have to cut ties with the friend group that reinforced toxic behavior. They'd have to demonstrate, not promise, demonstrate, that they understand why this was unacceptable. That would take months. Minimum. Hope flickered in her eyes. So there's a chance? No. Here's what you're not hearing. I don't want to fix this. I don't want someone who needs months of therapy and friend group excommunication to treat me with basic respect. I want someone who already knows how. I stood up, leaving cash for both coffees on the table. You had 7 years to show me you valued this marriage more than your friend's approval. You showed me the opposite. Repeatedly. The phone number challenge was just the most obvious example. I'm simply believing what you've been showing me. I love you, she whispered. Love isn't a feeling you have when it's convenient. It's a choice you make when it's not. You chose validation over partnership. You chose games over communication. You chose your friend's approval over my respect. I loved you. Past tense. The woman I loved wouldn't have done this. The woman sitting here is someone else. Someone who needs to figure out who she is without a group chat telling her what to think. I picked up my jacket. The storage unit address is in the email. 27 days for the house. 3 months for storage. After that, you're on your own. Which, ironically, is what you said you wanted to test. Congratulations. You're about to find out. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Wrong number. Wrong house. Wrong wife. My mistake for not seeing it sooner. But I'm seeing it now. I didn't look back. Weeks later, I'm sitting in my new apartment in Columbia Heights. Smaller space. Cleaner. Literally and metaphorically. Work productivity is up. Social life rebuilt with actual friends, not relationship auditors. I've started dating casually, enjoying getting to know people without games. Through mutual connections, I've heard about her situation. Living with one of the friends whose relationship also imploded. The friend group fragmented, blame being assigned in every direction. Some friends apologized to their partners and entered counseling. Others doubled down, now claiming all men are controlling. She's oscillating between blaming me and recognizing her own role. 3 relationships ended from that friend group. 2 more in serious counseling. The challenge culture exposed as manipulation culture. Women who'd been encouraging each other's worst impulses now facing consequences. People talk about toxic masculinity, and they should, but there's toxic femininity too. It just looks different. It looks like manipulation disguised as empowerment, control disguised as self-worth, and a support group that validates your worst impulses instead of checking them. Relationships based on tests are relationships based on insecurity. Secure people don't need to manufacture crises to validate their importance. They know their worth because they demonstrate it through actions, not prove it through games. Show me your friend group, and I'll show you your future. If your friends encourage manipulation, you'll manipulate. If they celebrate control, you'll control. If they normalize disrespect, you'll disrespect. Choose friends who make you better, not friends who make your worst impulses feel justified. The thing about consequences is that they're supposed to teach. But they only teach people who are willing to learn. Some people face consequences and change. Others face consequences and blame. I wasn't interested in finding out which one she was. I was interested in finding someone who didn't need consequences to treat me right. People ask if I regret being extreme. Ending a 7-year marriage over a phone challenge. They don't understand. It wasn't about the phone. It was about a woman who looked at our marriage and thought, what can I take away to test if he notices, instead of, what can I add to make it stronger? The phone number was just the last straw. Before that were hundreds of smaller tests, smaller manipulations, smaller moments where she chose her friend's advice over our partnership. I don't regret leaving. I regret not seeing it sooner. I regret tolerating the smaller manipulations that made her think the bigger ones were acceptable. Someone recently asked me if I ever think about what might have happened if I chased her. If I'd panicked when she deleted my number. If I'd played the game the way she expected. I do think about it. And here's what I know would have happened. I would have reinforced that manipulation works. That tests are acceptable. That disrespect is tolerable if you just perform enough panic to satisfy her friend's predictions. Instead, I taught a different lesson. Not just to her, but to myself. Some relationships end in explosive fights. Screaming matches. Dramatic showdowns. Ours ended in 3 days of silence. One moving truck, and a realization that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is simply let go. Wrong number, wrong house, wrong relationship, but the right decision.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.